Earlier I told you a story of heartbreak. It's one of the oldest stories of heartbreak that's ever been told. Today, right now, I'm going to tell you one of the newest. This is a piece by me. It was written hypothetically a few hours ago. It's called Gestalt. Titus was sitting anxiously at the restaurant. He had been seeing Janet for about 4.5 weeks. They had spent one weekend together, 3 dates in which they did not spend the night together. She had had 6 orgasms. He had had 4 so far. Things were going well. So he sat at the restaurant and he anxiously waited for her to arrive. She was working late that day at the bank. She was a teller, and the men she worked with treated her like a secretary, and she often complained about it, but he liked listening to that. She showed up for dinner, and she had a look in her eye that didn't match the feeling he had in his heart. He was thrilled to see her. He had, you know, after so many weeks, he had started to think that maybe something real was forming, and she looked distant, she looked distracted, and he knew that while they talked about, you know, Breaking Bad and co-workers and different craft beers that they had tasted throughout the week when they hadn't seen each other, he knew that her heart wasn't in this small talk that had been like magic to them for the past weeks, and he knew that she had something to say, and she waited till after the entree to say it, which drove him nuts because he wanted to be excited about his entree. It was a roasted Cornish hen on top of spätzle, and he loved spätzle, but he couldn't enjoy it because he knew there was something on her mind. And after the spätzle and the Cornish hen, she told him she had terminal cancer. 4.5 weeks in, and Titus gets a very hard lesson in Gestalt. Gestalt is a principle by a German philosopher whose name escapes me at the moment. It was probably Kant, but I don't want to promise you that. And Gestalt is the idea that you can put yourself in someone else's shoes. And up until this night, Titus had felt himself a master at Gestalt. He had often spent hours putting himself in Janet's shoes, thinking about the life they were going to have together, hoping she hoped the same things as him. And suddenly it was all twisted upside down on its head because he realized that she was looking for companionship down a road that was darker than any road he had ever imagined. And in the very back of his head was a greedy little horny demon who wondered if ovarian cancer made sex impossible. And he felt guilty for having that thought, and suddenly the life he had been picturing for himself did not coincide even slightly with the life that Janet had been picturing for herself. And he saw in her eyes a look that said she had done this before. She was walking down a dark path, and she was doing it alone. And we've already talked about the prison of loneliness, and I can't imagine how Janet felt facing that prison, knowing that her time was short. So Titus got a powerful lesson in Gestalt. And he looked in Janet's eyes, and Janet looked back in his, and he knew something that he knew she knew as well. That he wasn't capable of loving someone without a future. He didn't have that level of Gestalt within him. He wasn't able to put herself in her shoes and put himself in her shoes and be her companion down a path that was too short, was too unimagined. He knew that, just like Janet, he would probably die alone. That night they had the most powerful, earth-quaking sex that either of them had ever had. And they knew for a brief minute, shorter than 30 seconds, while their bodies quivered in painful ecstasy, that happiness is not a future, happiness is not an extended period of time, happiness is a brief moment between shattering realizations of how selfish we truly are.